My family called me worthless. Their words cut deeper than any wound I'd ever face. I was Avery Callahan, the daughter who dared to dream beyond their perfect plans. In our Wellesley home, success was measured in degrees, not courage. My father, a renowned economist, saw my military uniform as a joke. My mother, a brilliant scientist, hid her disappointment behind tight smiles. My sister, Nora, laughed outright, calling my medals meaningless. For years, I carried their judgment like a weight, each dismissal a reminder I'd never be enough. They saw a failure, a shadow of their academic glory. But I chose a different path, one forged in mud and blood, where every second mattered. Their scorn shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was about to prove them wrong in a way they could never imagine, in a place where heroes are born. Then, everything changed. In the Grand East Room of the White House, I stood tall, my dress uniform pressed, my heart pounding. The Commander-in-Chief looked into my eyes, his voice steady and clear, "You saved more American lives than anyone will ever know." Those words echoed, drowning out years of my family's doubt. The Distinguished Service Cross hung heavy around my neck, a testament to the lives I'd fought for under enemy fire. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper, "My brother was one of those hostages. Thank you." In that moment, I wasn't the family disappointment. I was a soldier, a medic, a hero. My parents and sister sat in the audience, their faces pale, their world shifting. They'd never asked about my service, never cared. But now, the truth was undeniable, spoken by the most powerful man in the world. This is my story, a journey from rejection to redemption, from a family's scorn to a nation's honor. I'm Sergeant Avery Callahan, and I went from their disappointment to a decorated combat medic. Where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button, because this story might change how you see the heroes around you. It's a tale of proving worth, not to those who doubt you, but to yourself. Share your city in the comments, and let's honor the unsung heroes among us. Join me as I take you through the battles, the pain, and the moment that redefined my life forever. I was born into a world where success was a family heirloom, polished and displayed for all to see. In our colonial home in Wellesley, Massachusetts, expectations hung heavy, like the academic awards lining our walls. My father, Dr. Lawrence Callahan, was a giant in economics, his name etched in university halls. His lectures shaped minds, his presence shaped our lives. My mother, Dr. Evelyn Callahan, was a biochemist whose research unlocked secrets of life in sterile labs. Her breakthroughs were celebrated in journals, her pride in her work a quiet fire. My older sister, Nora, was their masterpiece, valedictorian, top of her class, now a rising star at a Manhattan law firm. At 30, I was the outlier, the one who didn't fit their mold. The Callahan name carried weight, a legacy of intellect and prestige, but I was the daughter who strayed. Our home was a shrine to achievement, every corner filled with trophies of academic conquest. Family dinners were symposiums, debates over theory and ambition, where my voice felt small, my dreams smaller. I learned early that love came with conditions, perfect grades, a clear path to an Ivy League future. My parents' eyes lit up for Nora's accolades, but for me, there were only sighs, heavy with unspoken disappointment. They had mapped my life before I could speak, a blueprint for success I was expected to follow. But something else stirred in me, a pull toward a different kind of purpose, one not found in lecture halls or research papers. My grandfather's stories were my secret rebellion, tales of courage that felt more real than any equation. I wasn't meant for their world of polished desks and pristine labs. I wanted something raw, something that demanded my hands, my heart. Their vision of success was a cage, and I was restless inside it. Every expectation felt like a chain, pulling me toward a life I didn't choose. I was Avery Callahan, the daughter who dared to dream differently, and I was about to break free from the weight of their judgment, even if it meant standing alone. At 9 years old, I found my North Star in my grandfather, Calvin Callahan, a World War II combat medic. His stories weren't just tales, they were lifelines. He'd sit me down, his voice low, recounting nights in Normandy, saving soldiers under fire, his medic badge gleaming like a beacon. "Avery," he'd say, "I didn't save the world in a lab. I saved it one life at a time, in the mud and blood." That badge, worn and heavy, meant more to me than any diploma. But my parents saw his service as a footnote, a detour from his later life as a hospital administrator. They had other plans for me: science camps every summer, tutors drilling equations, introductions to colleagues' kids already on the right path. My bedroom was a museum of their ambitions, walls covered with anatomy charts and periodic tables, not posters of heroes. I was good, B+ grades, a track star, but never enough. My mother's voice was sharp. Nora had perfect SATs. She had her pick of schools. My father's sighs were louder, each one a verdict: I was falling short. Their disappointment wasn't just words, it was the way they looked through me, as if I were a puzzle they couldn't solve. I tried to fit their mold, stayed up late studying, ran harder on the track, but the gap between us grew. My grandfather's stories were my escape, his courage a fire they couldn't extinguish. I'd hold his badge in secret, dreaming of a life where my hands could save, not just my mind. But every step toward that dream met resistance. "Medicine is for hospitals, not battlefields," my father said, his tone final. My mother's eyes pleaded, "Don't waste your potential." Their love felt like a contract I couldn't sign. I was suffocating under their expectations, torn between their world and the one calling me. At night, I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd ever be enough. I wasn't their prodigy, but I had something they couldn't see, a heart that beat for purpose, not prestige. I was ready to choose my own path, even if it meant leaving them behind. High school ended, and the weight of my family's expectations crushed harder. I applied to their chosen colleges, second-tier schools, not Harvard or Yale, but respectable enough for their plan. The rejection letters came like blows, one after another. Waitlisted at 2, accepted at 3 lesser universities, I was a disappointment they couldn't hide. "We'll make it work," my father said, his sigh louder than his words. "State school for undergrad, then maybe you can transfer somewhere better." Their voices dripped with pity, as if I'd already failed. My semester at State University was a haze of misery, each lecture a reminder I didn't belong in their world. Then, a spark changed everything. A military recruiter, Sergeant Amanda Wallace, came to my school. While others ignored her table, I was drawn in. She spoke of purpose, of saving lives on the front lines, of being part of something bigger. Her words echoed my grandfather's, and for the first time, I saw a path that was mine. At 20, I made my choice. I enlisted in the U.S. Army as a combat medic, defying every expectation. Over dinner, I told my family. The air turned cold. My father nearly choked. "The military? That's for people who can't make it elsewhere. Is that what you think of yourself, Avery?" My mother covered her face, whispering, "Where did we go wrong?" Nora laughed, sharp and cruel, "Playing soldier, Avery. They'll stick you in an office, filing papers." Their words stung, but I held firm. "I'm going to be a combat medic, like Grandpa," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. My father snapped, "Your grandfather became respectable after the war. He didn't waste his life." Their rejection was a wall, but I was done trying to climb it. I signed the enlistment papers, my hands steady, my heart racing. This wasn't their dream, it was mine. I wasn't running from failure, I was running toward purpose. The Army offered me a chance to prove what they couldn't see: I was more than their disappointment. I was a soldier, ready to save lives, no matter the cost. The night before I left, I sat on my childhood bed, surrounded by the ghosts of their expectations. Rejection letters from colleges lay scattered, each one a mark of my so-called failure. Next to them, my enlistment papers felt like a promise, a chance to rewrite my story. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind, "Save one life at a time, Avery." His words were my anchor, pulling me through the doubt. I packed my duffel bag, folding my life into a few essentials, each item a step away from their judgment. My parents' disapproval clung to me, heavy as the silence at dinner. They hadn't hugged me, hadn't wished me well. My mother's last words were, "Don't embarrass us." My father's were worse, "You're throwing away your potential." Nora's smirk lingered, "You'll be back when you realize it's not a movie." I wanted to scream that this was real, that I was choosing a life of meaning, but their eyes were already elsewhere. By morning, I stood at the door, my bag slung over my shoulder, the house quiet. My parents watched from the window, their faces cold, unyielding. I boarded the bus to basic training, the engines rumbled drowning out their voices. The road stretched ahead, uncertain but mine. I wasn't running from them, I was running towards something greater. Their disapproval was a shadow, but my grandfather's courage lit my way. I saw his badge in my mind, worn and proud, a symbol of what I could become. The bus pulled away, and I felt a weight lift, replaced by a fire I hadn't known I had. I was Avery Callahan, not their failure, not their disappointment. I was a soldier, a medic, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Their world of degrees and prestige was behind me now. Ahead was a battlefield, not of their making, but of mine, a place where I'd prove my worth, not to them, but to myself. As the miles grew between us, I made a vow, I'd carry their doubt, but it wouldn't break me. I'd save lives, one at a time, and find the purpose they could never understand. Basic training was a crucible, a place where I was stripped down to nothing and rebuilt into something stronger. For the first time, I wasn't measured against my sister's perfect SATs or my parents' towering degrees. The army didn't care about the Callahan legacy or my father's lectures at the university. They cared about my grit, my will, my ability to keep going when every muscle screamed to stop. At 20, I stepped off that bus into a world of mud, sweat, and shouting drill sergeants, each one demanding more than I thought I had. The obstacle courses tested my body, crawling under barbed wire, scaling walls, running miles with a pack that felt like it held my family's expectations. The mental grind was tougher. I learned to shut out fear, to focus when chaos roared around me. My bunkmates became my first allies, their encouragement a lifeline when I faltered. I wasn't Avery, the family disappointment, here. I was Callahan, a soldier carving her own path. Every push-up, every mile, every shouted order was a chance to prove I was more than their judgment. I thrived in ways I never expected, my body growing stronger, my mind sharper. I graduated near the top of my class, not because I was trying to outshine Nora, but because I was finally free to be me. My drill sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Sergeant Harris, pulled me aside on the last day. "Callahan," he said, his voice gruff but warm, "you've got heart. That's rarer than you think." His words landed like a medal I hadn't yet earned, a validation my family never offered. I'd lie awake at night, the barracks quiet, thinking of my grandfather's stories, saving lives in the chaos of war. His badge was my talisman, tucked in my pocket, a reminder of why I was here. My parents' voices still echoed, "You're throwing away your potential," but they were fading, drowned out by the rhythm of boots on gravel, the cadence of a new purpose. I wasn't running from their disappointment anymore, I was running towards something greater. Basic training didn't just make me a soldier, it showed me I could be enough, not for them, but for myself. It was the first time I felt seen, not as a failure, but as someone who could make a difference, one determined step at a time. Combat medic training was where I found my calling, a place where my hands became my strength and my heart found its purpose. It was relentless, a gauntlet of skills that pushed me beyond what I thought I could endure. We trained in simulated war zones, the air thick with smoke, the ground shaking with mock explosions. I learned to start IVs while wearing chemical protective gear, my fingers fumbling until they didn't. Tourniquets in the dark became second nature, my hands steady even as my pulse raced. Instructors screamed orders under simulated gunfire, teaching us that hesitation could cost lives. Callahan, one said, "You've got ice in your veins and fire in your soul." His words burned into me, a spark that kept me going through sleepless nights of memorizing protocols. Every scenario was a test: stabilize a patient with a severed artery, decompress a collapsed lung, all while the clock ticked and chaos pressed in. I discovered a gift I didn't know I had. My hands stayed calm under pressure, my mind clear when others panicked. I'd practice alone in the barracks, bandaging imaginary wounds, hearing my grandfather's voice, "One life at a time, Avery." His stories weren't just tales anymore, they were my blueprint. My family's dismissal, "You're playing soldier," faded against the weight of what I was learning. I wasn't playing, I was preparing to save lives in places most doctors would never go. My shooting qualified at expert level, my fitness scores topped the charts, but it was my heart that set me apart. An instructor, Captain Reynolds, noticed. "You don't just learn this stuff, Callahan. You live it." Her praise was a lifeline, pulling me through moments of doubt. My parents never asked about my training, never cared about the nights I spent mastering skills that would mean life or death. But here, I was enough. I'd hold my grandfather's badge in the dark, its edges worn from his hands, now guiding mine. Combat medic training wasn't just about skills, it was about becoming someone who could face fear and still act. I was no longer the girl who failed their expectations. I was a medic, ready to run toward the wounded when others ran away, carrying a purpose they could never understand. Afghanistan was where I found my real family, not in the polished halls of Wellesley, but in the dust and heat of the 10th Mountain Division. Deployed at 21, I stepped into a world where survival demanded trust, and bonds were forged in shared hardship. My squad became my anchor: Sergeant Tara Brooks, with her sharp wit and fiercer loyalty, Captain Nathan Hayes, whose steady leadership held us together. We shared makeshift cakes from Marie's, celebrated birthdays under starless skies, and traded fears during long nights on guard duty. They didn't care about my family's degrees or my B+ grades. They saw me, Avery, the medic who had their backs. Tara once said, "You're the one we trust when it all goes to hell, Callahan." Her words were worth more than any diploma. We laughed over bad coffee, patched each other's blisters, and held space for the fears we couldn't say aloud. Back home, my family remained a distant ache. I called before deployment, hoping for a shred of support. "Afghanistan," my mother said, her voice flat. "Just keep your head down," my father added, no warmth, no pride. No care packages came, no letters arrived, while my squad mates got stacks of mail. I'd watch them read letters from home, their faces softening, and feel the sting of my family's silence. But my squad filled that void. Tara shared her mom's cookies, Nathan told stories of his kids. They were my home now, a family built on trust, not judgment. My first Christmas in uniform, I went back to Wellesley, hoping for a change. I stood in my dress uniform, ribbons earned through sweat and skill, but my mother asked, "When are you done playing dress up?" Nora smirked, "Nice costume, Avery. Handing out band-aids yet?" Their words cut, but I held my head high. They didn't ask about the lives I'd trained to save, the nights I'd spent preparing for war. I returned to base, their rejection a familiar weight, but my squad's acceptance was stronger. In Afghanistan, I found purpose in the chaos, a clarity my family could never see. I wasn't their disappointment here, I was their medic, their lifeline. With every mission, I felt my grandfather's badge in my pocket, guiding me toward a purpose that was mine alone. 3 months into my deployment, everything changed. Our convoy rolled through a dusty valley when an IED ripped through the lead vehicle. The explosion shook the ground, smoke and screams filling the air. My training kicked in, drowning out fear. I grabbed my medical bag and ran through gunfire, bullets kicking up dirt around me. Staff Sergeant Derek Vance was trapped in the wreckage, his leg torn open, blood pulsing onto the sand. "Stay with me, Derek," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. I applied a tourniquet, my hands slick but sure, and started in 4 under fire. New, his eyes locked on mine, wide with pain but trusting. "You got this, Callahan," he gasped. I held pressure on his wound, counting seconds until the medevac's roar broke through. 14 minutes, 14 endless minutes of keeping him alive as bullets flew. The helicopter took him, and I exhaled, my hands shaking but my resolve unbroken. I earned an Army Commendation Medal with Valor for that day, a recognition my squad celebrated with shouts and slaps on the back. New, Tara hugged me, whispering, "You're our rock, Avery." But when I called home, the line felt colder than the desert night. "I saved a soldier's life," I told my mother, my voice tight with hope. "That's nice, dear," she said, distracted. "Did you hear Nora made partner at her firm?" My father didn't ask about the mission, Nora didn't care about the medal. Their indifference was a wound deeper than any shrapnel. New, I sat alone that night, the medal heavy in my hand, wondering why their approval still mattered. But my squad's respect, their trust, was louder. They called me their medic, their lifeline, not a disappointment. I'd proven myself in that valley, not to them, but to the soldiers who needed me. New, Derek sent a letter from the hospital. "You gave me a second chance, Callahan. I'll never forget it." His words were my anchor, proof that my purpose wasn't a game. I wasn't playing soldier, as Nora mocked. I was saving lives, one desperate moment at a time. That day in the dust and blood, I knew I'd found something my family could never take away, a calling that defined me, not their doubts, but my courage. My second deployment was a different beast, darker and more dangerous than anything I'd faced before. At 22, I'd proven myself in Afghanistan, but this was a new challenge, a call to join a special operations medical team. The selection process was brutal, designed to break even the strongest. It wasn't just about skill, it was about heart, about who could keep their head when the world was falling apart. I trained in the dead of night, running miles with a 60-pound pack, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. We practiced surgeries in moving vehicles, the hum of engines mixing with the shouts of instructors. "Faster, Callahan," they'd yell as I fumbled with 4 lines in simulated chaos. Sleep was a memory, 48-hour drills with no rest, psychological tests that dug into your fears. Lieutenant Colonel James Davis, a grizzled officer with eyes like steel, pulled me aside. "Avery," he said, "this is high risk, no margin for error. You in?" I nodded, my grandfather's badge heavy in my pocket, his words echoing, "One life at a time." New, I'd stare at that badge in the barracks, its worn edges a reminder of why I'd chosen this path. My family's voices, "You're throwing away your potential," were distant now, drowned out by the fire in my chest. I wasn't here to prove them wrong, I was here to prove myself right. The training pushed me to my limits, but I thrived. I aced trauma scenarios, stabilizing patients under mock gunfire, my hands steady when others shook. My shooting qualified at expert, my fitness scores topped the charts, but it was my resolve that set me apart. New, during a night drill, I carried a wounded dummy through a mile of mud, rain soaking my gear, my team counting on me. Captain Reynolds watched, her nod a rare approval. "You're not just a medic, Callahan. You're a lifeline." Her words carried me through the doubt, the exhaustion, the moments I questioned if I was enough. My family never asked about this world, never cared about the nights I spent training to save lives in the worst conditions. But here, I was seen, not as the daughter who failed their expectations, but as a soldier ready for the impossible. New, I'd lie awake, replaying my grandfather's stories of Normandy, knowing I was walking his path, not theirs. Special Ops selection didn't just test me, it forged me into something new, a medic who could face chaos and still act, who could carry the weight of lives in her hands. I was ready for what came next, even if it meant running straight into hell. April 15, 2019, the call came down, a mission that would change everything. 3 American aid workers, held hostage in a mountain compound deep in enemy territory, were facing execution. Our 12-person special operations team was tasked with their rescue, and I was the medic. The briefing room was stark, lit by a single bulb, satellite images projected on a cracked wall. The air was heavy with tension, every face grim. Intelligence showed 30 hostiles, heavily armed, with a labyrinth of tunnels guarding the hostages. New, the lead officer, Major Claire Donovan, laid it out, we've got 72 hours before they're moved or worse. This is our shot. My stomach tightened, but my hands stayed steady, my grandfather's badge a quiet anchor in my pocket. We memorized escape routes, radio codes, and contingency plans, knowing one mistake could end it all. New, I checked my medical kit, tourniquets, chest seals, IVs, each item a lifeline for the fight ahead. The team trusted me to keep them alive, and I felt the weight of that trust, heavier than any pack I'd carried. We launched at midnight, Black Hawk slicing through a moonless night, the rotor blades a low roar in my chest. I sat beside Sergeant Marcus Reed, his usual grin replaced by a tight jaw. New, he leaned over, whispering, "You got our backs, right, Callahan?" I nodded, my voice firm, always. The cabin was dark, our faces lit only by the glow of instrument panels. 20 minutes from the target, the world turned to chaos. Ground fire erupted, tracer rounds streaking red across the sky. Our Black Hawk shuddered, alarms screaming as a rocket hit the tail. "Brace," the pilot shouted. The chopper spun, metal groaning, and we crashed into a rocky valley 3 miles out. Smoke choked the air, the smell of fuel sharp and acrid. I unbuckled, my training kicking in, and crawled through the wreckage. Major Claire Donovan was slumped in the cockpit, blood streaming from her head. I checked her pulse, weak but there, and applied a pressure bandage, my hands moving on instinct. New, the radio crackled, enemy chatter closing in. I dragged Claire to cover, her weight heavy against my shoulder, my own breath ragged. Lieutenant Ethan Cole was next, his arm shattered, bone exposed but not bleeding out yet. I splinted it fast, my fingers slick with sweat, and started in 4. "New, stay with me, Cole," I said, his eyes wide with shock but trusting. The crash site was a nightmare, twisted metal, sparks, and the distant pop of gunfire. My squad was scattered, some dazed, others already returning fire. New, I moved between them, checking vitals, shouting orders to stay low. The enemy was closing in, their shouts echoing in the dark. I grabbed the radio, calling for backup, my voice cutting through the chaos. "This is Medic Callahan, we're down," requesting immediate extraction. The response was static, then a faint promise of a chopper in 2 hours. 2 hours in hostile territory, with wounded to protect and enemies circling. New, Marcus grabbed my arm, his voice low, "We're counting on you, Avery." I nodded, my heart pounding but my resolve iron. The mission was in tatters, but I wasn't. I was their medic, their lifeline, and I'd keep them alive, no matter what came next. The valley was a kill zone, gunfire cracking like a whip, bullets tearing through the night. We were pinned down behind the wreckage, the air thick with dust and fear. My squad returned fire, muzzle flashes lighting their faces, Sergeant Tara Brooks, Captain Nathan Hayes, and the others, fighting to hold our ground. I moved between the wounded, my medical bag open, my hands steady despite the chaos. Major Claire Donovan's head wound was stable, but she was fading, her pulse thready. I adjusted her whispering, "Hang on, Major. I've got you." Lieutenant Ethan Cole groaned, his shattered arm splintered but useless. I checked his vitals, my fingers brushing his clammy skin, and gave him a shot of morphine to dull the pain. Knew, the enemy was closing in, their shouts louder, their gunfire relentless. A bullet grazed my helmet, the impact jarring my teeth, but I kept moving. I crawled to Sergeant Marcus Reed, who was clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. "Chest wound," he gasped, his breathing shallow. I tore open his vest, finding a sucking chest wound, air bubbling with each breath. I slapped on a chest seal, my hands slick with his blood, and started in 4. "Stay with me, Marcus," I said, my voice firm, his eyes locking on mine. "Knew," he nodded weakly, whispering, "Tell my son I tried." Those words hit like a punch, but I pushed them down, focusing on the task. The enemy lobbed a grenade, the explosion shaking the ground, shrapnel tearing into my thigh. Pain seared through me, hot and sharp, but I ignored it. I dragged Marcus to better cover, my legs screaming with every step. "Knew," Tara shouted, "Avery, get down," as another burst of gunfire ripped past. I dropped low, pulling my rifle to return fire, my shots measured but fierce. I wasn't just a medic now, I was a soldier, fighting to keep my team alive. The radio crackled, my voice cutting through. "This is Callahan, we need airstrikes, coordinates 34.6 north, 67.2 east." I'd spotted enemy positions in the chaos, my eyes scanning the ridgeline. "Knew," the response came, a faint promise of support, but we had to hold out. I moved back to Cole, his face pale, and adjusted his 4, my hands shaking but precise. The gunfire didn't stop, a relentless storm, but my focus was absolute. "Knew," Claire stirred, her voice weak, "You're doing good, Callahan." Her trust fueled me, a reminder of why I was here. My grandfather's badge was still in my pocket, its weight grounding me as bullets flew. I wasn't thinking of my family's dismissal now, "You're playing soldier," only of the lives in my hands. Every second was a battle, every breath a victory. I was their lifeline, and I wouldn't break, not here, not now. The gunfire faded, but the danger didn't. We were 3 miles from the extraction point, in hostile territory, with 4 wounded and enemies hunting us. I took charge, my voice steady despite the pain in my thigh, shrapnel burning with every step. "We move now," I told the team, slinging my medical bag and helping lift Major Claire Donovan onto a makeshift stretcher. Lieutenant Ethan Cole leaned on Tara, his arm useless but his spirit unbroken. Sergeant Marcus Reed was fading, his chest wound stabilized but his oxygen dropping. I checked his vitals, my hands moving on instinct, and adjusted his chest seal. "Hang on, Marcus," I whispered, his son's face flashing in my mind. Knew, the terrain was brutal, jagged rocks, steep inclines, the air thin and cold. We moved under cover of darkness, evading patrols, every rustle a threat. My supplies were dwindling, only 2 4 bags left, a handful of bandages. I rationed them, prioritizing the worst cases. Knew, Tara scouted ahead, her whispers guiding us through the shadows. "Keep moving, Callahan," she said, her trust a lifeline. My leg throbbed, blood soaking my pant leg, but I pushed through, carrying Claire's stretcher with Nathan. The team was counting on me, and I wouldn't let them down. Knew, a patrol's flashlight swept close, and we froze, my heart pounding as I shielded Marcus. The enemy passed, and we moved again, slower now, exhaustion clawing at us. I kept checking vitals, my fingers numb but precise, whispering encouragement, "We're almost there, Cole. Stay strong, Claire." Marcus's breathing grew weaker, his eyes distant. I gave him my last oxygen mask, praying it was enough. Knew, at dawn, we hit a ravine, the extraction point in sight but still a mile away. Enemy chatter crackled on the stolen radio, closing in. I called in our position, "This is Medic Callahan, we're at 34.7 north, 67.3 East, requesting immediate extraction. The response was faint, hold tight, 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like forever. New, Marcus's pulse dropped, his chest seal failing. I reapplied it, my hands shaking, and started CPR, counting compressions under my breath. "Don't you dare leave me," I said, tears burning my eyes. He didn't make it. His last breath haunted me, his words, "Tell my son I tried," a weight I'd carry forever. I collapsed at the extraction point as the helicopter's roar broke the silence, my body spent but my mission complete. The intelligence I'd radioed saved 27 hostages later, but Marcus's loss broke something in me. I wasn't just a medic anymore, I was a soldier who'd faced death and kept going, for them, for him. 6 months after that brutal mission, a call from the Pentagon changed everything. I was 22, still carrying the weight of Marcus's death, his last words, "Tell my son I tried," echoing in my sleepless nights. I walked into a stark office, my boots echoing on polished floors, my uniform crisp but my heart heavy. A general, his chest heavy with ribbons, stood to greet me. "Sergeant Callahan," he said, his voice steady, "you're receiving the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism." My breath caught. The Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. He handed me a folder, the citation inside detailing my actions in that valley: 15 lives saved, 27 hostages freed by my intelligence, 3 terrorist attacks stopped. I stared at the words, my hands trembling. Was this real? Did I deserve this? New, I thought of Marcus, of Claire, of Cole, their faces flashing in my mind. I'd run through gunfire, ignored shrapnel in my leg, kept them alive when death was closing in. But Marcus didn't make it, and that failure gnawed at me. The general's eyes softened. "You did more than most could, Callahan. The president wants to present this himself." The White House. The words felt surreal, a world away from the dusty chaos of Afghanistan. I'd be standing before the commander-in-chief, honored for the very things my family mocked. I texted them, my fingers hesitating over the keys. White House ceremony. Distinguished Service Cross. Can you come? I half expected silence, or worse, another dismissal. They replied they'd be there, but their words were curt, no warmth, no pride. New, I lay awake that night, Marcus's face haunting me, my family's voices louder, "You're throwing away your potential." I clutched my grandfather's badge, its worn edges grounding me. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for the soldiers I'd saved, for the ones I couldn't. New, the Pentagon sent me to Walter Reed beforehand, where I'd been developing trauma protocols, teaching medics how to save lives faster. A colonel there told me, "Your work's changing how we treat the wounded, Callahan." His words were a lifeline, a reminder that my purpose wasn't tied to my family's approval. But as I packed for DC, doubt crept in. Would they see me now, or would I still be the daughter who failed them? The flight to Washington was quiet, my mind racing with memories of gunfire and blood, of Marcus's last breath. I wasn't ready for the spotlight, but I was ready to honor my team. The White House loomed ahead, a symbol of recognition I'd never sought, but one that would force my family to face the truth I'd lived. The East Room of the White House was a world I'd never imagined stepping into. Chandeliers gleamed, gold curtains framed the space, and rows of chairs held generals, dignitaries, and my family, their faces stiff with unease. I stood in my dress uniform, the weight of the moment pressing against my chest. My thigh ached where shrapnel had torn through, a quiet reminder of the valley. The military aide stepped forward, his voice clear and commanding, reading the citation. On April 15, 2019, Sergeant Avery Callahan displayed extraordinary heroism in the face of extreme danger. Under heavy enemy fire, she stabilized 15 wounded soldiers, including Major Claire Donovan and Lieutenant Ethan Cole, after a helicopter crash in hostile territory. My heart pounded as he continued, detailing my actions, dragging the wounded to cover, returning fire, calling in airstrikes that saved the mission. Her radioed intelligence led to the rescue of 27 American hostages and disrupted 3 planned terrorist attacks. The room was silent, every word landing like a hammer. I glanced at my family, my father's hands clenched, my mother's eyes averted, Nora's smirk gone. The president stepped forward, his presence commanding yet warm. He pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to my chest, the metal heavy, its weight grounding me. "Sergeant Callahan," he said, his voice resonating through the room, "you saved more American lives than anyone will ever know." His eyes met mine, steady and sincere, and for a moment, the world stopped. "Knew," he leaned closer, his voice a whisper only I could hear, "my brother was one of those hostages. My family owes you a debt we can't repay." My breath caught, tears stinging my eyes. I saluted, my hands steady, but inside, I was reeling. The president's brother, one of the 27 I'd helped save. My family's faces were pale, their eyes wide, as if seeing me for the first time. Knew, the citation didn't mention Marcus, but his absence was a shadow over the moment. I'd saved so many, but not him, and that loss lingered. The applause filled the room, generals standing, their respect a stark contrast to my family's silence all these years. I stood tall, not for them, but for my squad, for Marcus, for the lives I'd fought for. Knew, the president shook my hand, his grip firm, and said, "Your courage is what keeps this nation strong." His words were a shield against the doubts my family had planted. My parents and Nora sat frozen, their world unraveling. They'd called me worthless, mocked my uniform, dismissed my service. But here, in this room, the truth was undeniable. I wasn't their failure. I was a soldier who'd run toward danger, who'd saved lives when it mattered most. Knew, a general approached, his voice low, "Your trauma protocols at Walter Reed are saving soldiers every day, Callahan." His praise was another layer of validation, proof that my work extended beyond that valley. The ceremony wasn't just about a medal, it was about a purpose my family had never understood. As the applause faded, I felt a quiet strength settle in me. I'd carried their judgment for years, but now, standing before the nation's highest honor, I knew my worth wasn't theirs to define. The president's words echoed in my mind, louder than my family's scorn, a testament to the lives I'd saved and the soldier I'd become. The reception was a blur of handshakes and murmured praise, a world as foreign as the battlefield had once been. Generals in crisp uniforms approached, their medals glinting, their words heavy with respect. "Callahan," one said, "your trauma protocols at Walter Reed are changing how we save lives." His voice carried a weight my family's never had. Another, a colonel with gray at his temples, added, "Your work's making medics faster, stronger. You're saving soldiers before they even hit the ground." Their recognition was a balm, soothing wounds my family's dismissal had left. Knew, an aid worker, one of the 27 hostages my intelligence had helped save, approached, her eyes brimming with tears. "My daughter has a mom because of you," she said, pulling me into a hug. Her words hit harder than any medal, a reminder of why I'd fought through that valley. I nodded, my throat tight, Marcus's face flashing in my mind. I'd saved her, but not him, and that truth lingered. Knew, a State Department official joined us, his voice quiet but firm, "Your intel stopped 3 terrorist attacks, Callahan. You saved hundreds, maybe thousands." His words were a revelation, a ripple effect I hadn't fully grasped. My actions had reached beyond that night, beyond the lives I'd touched with my hands. The room buzzed with conversation, but my family stood apart, near a corner, their discomfort palpable. My father's hands were stuffed in his pockets, my mother's arms crossed, Nora's usual confidence replaced by a tense silence. They hadn't spoken to me yet, their presence a reminder of years of rejection. Knew, a young captain, his arm in a sling, approached, his voice low, "I trained under your protocols, Callahan. Saved my buddy last month because of you. His gratitude was another thread in the tapestry of purpose I'd woven, one my family couldn't see. I glanced at them, their eyes avoiding mine, and felt a pang, not of anger, but of distance. They'd never asked about my work, never cared about the lives I'd saved. New, a photographer asked for a photo with the president, who stood beside me, his smile warm. "This one's a hero," he told the room, and the applause swelled again. My family watched, their faces unreadable, caught in a moment they couldn't ignore. I wasn't seeking their approval anymore, but their presence here, in this room, was a crack in the wall they'd built. The reception was a celebration of my service, but it was also a mirror, reflecting the truth they'd refused to see. I stood among heroes, not as their daughter or sister, but as Sergeant Avery Callahan, a medic who'd earned her place. As the reception wound down, my family finally approached, their steps hesitant, their faces a mix of shock and something new, vulnerability. My father spoke first, his voice unsteady, a far cry from the commanding tone I'd known. "Avery," he said, "we had no idea." The words hung between us, heavy with years of dismissal. I met his eyes, my voice calm but firm, "You never asked." The truth landed like a stone. They'd mocked my uniform, called my service a waste, never once questioned what I'd faced. My mother's eyes were wet, her voice trembling, "We almost lost you." Her words carried a fear I hadn't expected, a crack in her polished facade. Nora, always sharp-tongued, looked down, her confidence gone. "I was wrong to mock you," she said, barely audible. I didn't understand. I nodded, the weight of their apologies strange after so long. New, my father took a step closer, his voice breaking, "I wanted to enlist once, when I was your age. But I wasn't brave enough. I couldn't face it." His confession stunned me, a glimpse into a man I'd never known, one who'd buried his own dreams under ambition. I saw him differently now, not as the untouchable scholar, but as someone who'd carried his own regrets. New, my mother reached for my hand, her touch tentative. "We were scared, Avery. Scared you'd throw your life away." I pulled back, not out of anger, but clarity. "I didn't throw it away," I said. "I built it." Their eyes widened, as if seeing me for the first time, not the daughter who failed their expectations, but the soldier who'd saved lives. New, Nora's voice was soft, "I thought you were chasing a fantasy. But you're the realest thing in this family." Her words were a bridge, fragile but there, after years of her laughter cutting me down. I didn't forgive them fully, not yet. The hurt was too deep, their dismissal too long. But this was a start, a moment where they saw me, not their version of me. New, I thought of my grandfather's badge, still in my pocket, its weight a reminder of the purpose I'd found. "I did this for the lives I could save," I told them, "not to prove you wrong." My father nodded, his eyes glistening. "We're proud," he said, the words foreign but real. The room around us faded, the generals and dignitaries a distant hum. This wasn't closure, but it was a reckoning. They'd called me worthless, but the president had called me a hero. I'd carry both, but only one defined me now. The Distinguished Service Cross opened doors I never imagined, promotions, speaking engagements, a role training the next generation of combat medics at the Army Medical Department Center. At 22, I stood before recruits, teaching them to save lives under fire, just as I had. My hands, once slick with blood in that Afghan valley, now guided theirs, showing how to apply tourniquets, stabilize wounds, and stay calm when chaos roared. Every lesson carried the weight of Marcus's loss, Claire's survival, Cole's trust. I wasn't just a soldier anymore, I was shaping the future of military medicine. New, a colonel told me, "Callahan, your protocols are saving lives before soldiers hit the battlefield." His words were a quiet confirmation, a validation my family had never given. I'd found my place, not in their world of degrees and prestige, but in the grit of service, where every action mattered. The medal was a symbol, but my worth was in the lives I'd touched, soldiers who'd return to their families, medics who'd carry my lessons forward. Knew, I'd walked the training grounds, my grandfather's badge in my pocket, its worn edge as a reminder of why I'd chosen this path. My family's voices, "You're worthless, you're wasting your potential," were silent now, drowned out by the purpose I'd forged. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd saved 15 lives in that valley, helped free 27 hostages, and built protocols that saved countless more. My worth wasn't in their eyes, it was in the soldiers who trusted me, the recruits who learned from me. Knew, at night, I'd sit alone, the barracks quiet, and think of Marcus, his final words haunting but grounding me. I wasn't defined by my failures, but by the moments I'd run toward danger when others ran away. This was my calling, my legacy, not a degree on a wall, but lives saved, one desperate moment at a time. I was Sergeant Avery Callahan, a medic, a soldier, a woman who'd found her worth, not in their validation, but in the difference I made. My family's reckoning at the White House was just the beginning. Slowly, we started to heal. Knew, my father visited my base, his usual sternness replaced by quiet awe as he watched me train recruits. He stood by the field, his eyes following my every move, and later said, "I see it now, Avery. You're doing something extraordinary." His voice carried a pride I'd never heard before. My mother sent a shadow box, my grandfather's World War II medic badge nestled beside mine, a note tucked inside, "He'd be so proud of you." Her words, once sharp with disappointment, now held a warmth I'd longed for. Knew, Nora, my sister, started volunteering with veterans, her sharp tongue softened by stories of sacrifice she'd never understood. At a family dinner, she looked at my medals displayed beside her law degree and said, "You're the strongest of us." Their apologies weren't a cure, but a bridge. Knew, we started therapy, unraveling years of miscommunication, their fears clashing with my need for purpose. They'd been scared, of losing me, of my rejection of their world, but they saw me now, not as their failure, but as a hero. The hurt lingered, deep and raw, but we were building something new, with boundaries and respect. I didn't need their validation anymore, but their effort to understand was a gift, a fragile thread connecting us after years apart. My grandfather's badge, still in my pocket, reminded me I'd honored his legacy, and now, my family was beginning to honor mine. My story didn't end with the medal or my family's change of heart. It grew, rippling outward. Knew, a young recruit approached me after a training session, her eyes bright with determination. "I enlisted because of you, Sergeant Callahan," she said. "Your story made me believe I could do this." I looked at her, seeing myself at 20, and said, "Medals don't make you. It's running toward danger when others run away." Her nod was a spark, proof my purpose extended beyond that valley. Knew, I spoke at veterans events, sharing my journey, and heard stories from others who'd been underestimated, their worth questioned by those closest to them. Each one strengthened me, a reminder that my fight was theirs too. My worth was never about my family's approval or even the president's words, though they carried weight. It was in the lives I'd saved, the medics I'd trained, the people I'd inspired. Knew, I'd hold my grandfather's badge, its edges worn by his hands, now guiding mine, and know I was part of something bigger, a legacy of courage, of service. I wasn't just a soldier or a medic. I was proof you could define your own value, no matter who doubted you. My story, my scars, my medal, they were a call to others. Your worth is in your actions, in the lives you touch, not in the voices that call you worthless. My family's change of heart came after the White House, but the real victory was within me. I'd saved myself long before their apologies, finding my worth in the chaos of that Afghan valley, in the lives I pulled back from the edge. At 22, I'd faced gunfire, carried the wounded, and bore the weight of loss. Marcus's final words still echo in my heart. The Distinguished Service Cross was a symbol, but my purpose was deeper, forged in the trust of my squad, the recruits I train, and the lives my protocols save. New, I hold my grandfather's badge, its edges worn by his courage, and know I've honored his legacy. My family's approval, once a chain, is now a fragile bridge we're building. But I don't need their validation anymore. My worth is in the difference I make, running toward danger, saving one life at a time. New, I've learned that true value isn't in others' eyes, but in the moments you choose to act, to serve, to stand tall despite doubt. That's the heart of a soldier, a medic, a hero. This is my story, but it's not just mine. It's for anyone who's been underestimated, whose worth has been questioned by those closest to them. Have you ever felt like you weren't enough? Share your story in the comments, your voice matters. New, tell us where you're watching from, whether it's a small town or a big city, and let's honor the heroes among us, the ones who rise despite the odds. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join me for more stories of courage and redemption. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone fighting their own battles, searching for their own worth. New, my journey taught me that your value isn't in the doubts of others, but in the lives you touch, the purpose you claim. Let's celebrate the unsung heroes in our communities, the ones who prove their worth every day. Click to watch my next video, A Day as a Combat Medic, and keep this conversation going. Together, we can inspire each other to find our strength, to define our own value, no matter who tries to call us worthless.